Hi, Jake Portugal here with my final capstone for PE 589 Physical Education and Exercise Science titled Former Athletes and Long-Term Health with Dr. Cindy Tanis, fall 2015, now into January 2016 for the final run. This study of mine is 17 months in the making. I started down this path of research when I played my last college baseball game a little more than 17 months ago. I soon became hit with the fact and the reality that I was no longer going to be able to play the game I love. And when it came to a healthy lifestyle that involved eating habits, mood, stress, sleep patterns, workout patterns, fitness, life can easily become and quickly spiraling downward. But then I set to see this struggle out and see how many of my peers or other individuals, no matter what the sport, collegiately faced when playing their final game. This led to my purpose statement of the purpose of this study was to explore former athletes and non-former athletes' current fitness levels to determine the influence on long-term health. The research questions that followed are: what are the contributors of health and wellness to former athletes that exercise regularly? How do current levels of exercise differ among former athletes by sport? And how do current levels of exercise differ among gender? This leads me into my values, faiths, and beliefs, and how it shapes my study, and why this particular capstone project for me was much more than just research, and a lot more about an issue in my heart that I wanted my brain to be able to wrap around so that it could be life transforming, as well as mentally informing. And the way my faith plays is that Jesus wants the best for us. And part of that is that for that to happen, we need to put our self-worth in Him and Him alone, nobody else. And living a healthy lifestyle can help us with that, to prepare our body for the vigorousness of following Jesus. Also, depression and negative thoughts from lack of physical activity can happen. It can affect your mood, and it can depress you when you look in the mirror. And this physical activity will take our mind off of God when placed in the wrong areas. Thus, we begin to worship creation instead of the Creator. So, part of my values is why do I want to study this? Why do I want to keep in good shape? And I must keep God first in everything. Thirdly, exercise, healthy living, and outward appearance are meaningless without a heart that has changed by the grace of God. A lot of this is spoken in Ecclesiastes, where everything is in vain. Everything is vanity, unless God is put first. The scripture I chose to constantly be a reminder throughout this process was 1 Samuel 16:7. The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. This leads me into my first scholarly article review, which is titled Occurrence of Chronic Disease in Former Top-Level Athletes, Predominance of Benefits, Risk, or Selection Efforts, found in the Journal of Sports Medicine, authored by Kujala, Marti, Caprio, Hernalati, Takanian, and Sarna. The author's purpose of this scholarly article was to look at the impact sport has on the human body after play has ceased. The procedure was that in the years 1985, 1995, and 2002, surveys were sent out to all surviving participants that included questions about chronic disease, health habits, and the effects of performance-enhancing doping. The participants were male athletes who had represented Finland at the national level between 1920 and 1965, The other male participants included Finnish men that were close to age 20 and had been deemed completely healthy for the Finnish military standards. There were a total of 2,401 male athletes and 1,712 Finnish men analyzed. The methods were a totally male former elite athlete cohort, and the results, which is an interesting part that has played a vital role into my study, is that the former elite athletes are 50% less likely to have cardiac insufficiency compared to non-former athletes. That is a large percentage. And to wrap this in to my study and how it relates is that my study focusing on former athletes and non-former athletes' current fitness levels to determine the influence of long-term health, because the long-term data retrieval spanning decades revealing former athletes' health and perceived health through different stages of post-athletic career on the Finland side can be comparable no matter what country you're from. On to my second scholarly article, Cardiovascular Functions in Former Athletes, found in the Symposium Former Athletes Later in Life, authored by Fardy. The author's purpose was to find whether participation in sport reduces or increases cardiovascular function in adults. The procedure taken was that their former athletes were then placed into three categories according to the fitness level: low training intensity, moderate training intensity, and high training intensity. The remaining 417 participants became the control group of non-former athletes and administered the same physical test and ranked in one of the three training intensity categories. The participants included 506 men aged 27 to 74, with 89 of them being former athletes. The methods were a background questionnaire and then a physical test that ranged from BMI testing to fasting serum glucose and blood pressure to weight measurements. So a wide variety of methods. And the results found that former athletes have better long-term cardiovascular function than non-former athletes. This relates to my study to help determine the influence on long-term health because of the findings pertaining to cardiovascular health and the benefits that sports might have on that. There's no question that sports involve cardiovascular development, and to see that that plays a role in long-term health could help me further in my research. My third scholarly article review is relationship between vigorous exercise frequency and substance abuse among first-year college students, found in the Journal of American College Health, authored by Moore. The author's purpose was to examine the influence of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use behaviors in accordance with frequent physical activity among college students. The author's procedure was that the research staff asked students 4 screening questions to ascertain whether they were aged at least 18 years old, were first-year students, lived on campus, and had consumed alcohol in the past 30 days. The participants were 391 college students in Northeast Florida. The students were chosen as self-identified college alcohol drinkers. The method for this study was a survey. There was a research staff to assemble the data. The survey first asked a series of the 4 screening questions as I stated previously, and the students who fit these requirements were then set up for a time to meet in a quiet academic setting to take the survey. The results found that frequent exercisers reported drinking significantly more often and consuming a significant greater quantity of alcohol than did infrequent exercisers. Students who were frequent exercisers reported significantly low cigarette use than did students who reported infrequent exercise. This application to my study relates because athletes that are partaking in unhealthy habits when their metabolism is at their peak and exercise level is at their peak can also have long-term effects, because once these exercise levels are no longer at their peak and the chance that the unhealthy abuse habits still carry on can have long-term negative health effects. Coming back to my study and the methodology of my study, and where I took these research reviews and then turned it into my own study, and craftily, as I crafted my survey, is that the procedure I took was that I informed my participants as requested volunteers from the San Diego Community College staff directory. I gave them informed consent, and that the data collected required approximately 15 minutes. My participants were faculty and staff, 64 in total. 28 were former athletes, and 36 were non-former athletes. Of the former athletes, 10 were female, 18 were male. Of the non-former athletes, 16 were female, and 20 were male. My survey included a mixed method strategy titled Current Fitness Level Survey, CFLS. The quantitative research study used the survey instrument paper and pencil survey, which had 11 demographic questions, 3 yes and no questions, 3 multiple choice questions. And the qualitative research study also used the survey instrument of paper and pencil survey, had 21 Likert scale options, or 21 Likert scale questions with the options, with 4 different options of SA for strongly agree, A for agree, D for disagree, and SD for strongly disagree, as well as 2 open-ended questions to finish. My results were as follow. The main analysis found and led to an investigation that was formed surrounding the participants' perceptions and preferences in physical activity as contributors toward health and wellness. One multiple choice question was posed to differentiate between the former and non-former athlete that exercised regularly. The answers were then summarized into 4 subcategories. These 4 subcategories were health, image, weight management, and well-being. The health-related reasons were the driving force behind the decision to remain physically active in 36% of former athletes and 50% of the non-former athletes. For image, which is another way of saying physical appearance, was chosen by 4 of the former athletes, 14%, and 1 of the non-former athletes, so only 3%. Weight management was chosen by 7 of the former athletes, 25%, and 5 of the non-former athletes, 14%. Well-being, which includes 3 subcategories according to the survey, which were social emotional benefits, stress management, and enjoyment, accounted for 7, 25% of former athletes, and 12, 34% of non-former athletes. These numbers have revealed that former athletes' motivation to work out is largely diversified. There was not one category that largely stand out, but what it did find for the non-former athletes was that health and well-being far outperformed the other categories. This could be for future study, as we'll get to in just a bit. The discussion aspect of my survey found that the contributors of health and wellness to former athletes that exercise regularly were equally spread among 4 subcategories: health, image, weight management, and well-being, which I just spoke about. Some research that supports this finding is Swanson, 2005, as he studied athletic populations to promote lifelong fitness and health, and found that internal motivation is the largest contributor of an athlete's long-term health. Also, Rainey, Sargent, Drain, Vallis, and Ward in 95 distinguish the differences between former and non-former athletes' motivation toward lifelong health, and found that athletes' motivation were of wide variety. Also, former athletes' sports showed no distinguishable difference toward one's long-term health and wellness. This aspect of the discussion was formed from my second research question. Waltas and Slubaski, 2006, focused on various sports careers and found that participants of no particular sport outperformed others of another sport long term. Flowery, Brooks, and Bishops, 2008, determined that a specific sport did not make athletes more or less likely to have restricted activity levels long term. My third research question came to a conclusion that gender showed no distinguishable differences toward one's long-term health and wellness. Sources that agree and support this idea is Moore 2011 confirmed that gender plays no relationship in college athlete substance abuse and that rigorous exercise does not make a male or female more likely to abuse substances. That is, the gender does not make one more or less likely to abuse substances. Backman, Caprio, Kujala, and Sarna 2007 analyzed the mood of former athletes in relation to the functioning of daily living and found no discrepancies among gender. Moving on to future recommendations is that as a physical educator, portraying an active lifestyle and incorporating it not only in activities that bring a better level of physical well-being along with personal and emotional enjoyment should be the focus of instruction in a physical education setting to benefit both former and non-former athletes. Implications are that students in a physical education setting, regardless of athletic status, should be taught to focus on the many benefits physical activity can provide. Many physical education programs emphasize one benefit over another, but this study has shown widespread results to why individuals participate in lifelong health and fitness. For future research, the possibilities are endless, but another study could involve former high school athletes and non-former high school athletes. This would narrow the participant field and would give more information on the role of the high school coach as a role model for physical fitness. Participants could answer qualitative questions concerning coaches' emphasis on exercise and conditioning for athletes. Many different subtopics could be analyzed as well, such as the coach's ability to teach lifelong activities and exercise and mental discipline. I appreciate your time. This class was wonderful. Writing this paper has been an experience that will live with me for quite some time. And thank you very much for taking the time to watch this.